everybody! This week on Ask Kristen, I'm talking about daddy issues, which, is it just me or is daddy issues like such a gross sounding phrase? Grosser than, yes, moist. This week's Ask Kristen question is technically holiday themed because 'tis the season for confronting all those family issues that are just easier to avoid the rest of the year. And it's coming from Anessa Parker, who wanted to know a while back. As a daughter of a trash heap type father, I often think about how I fall into daddy issue stereotypes. As a youngster, a friend said, women end up marrying their father, and I recalled how my mom realized after she left my dad how much he reminded her of her own trash heap dad. I find myself attracted to men when I see them being sort of mean or doing something else slightly trash heapish, or I find myself attracted to someone and then realize after a short while that they share unfavorable traits with my father. Basically, my questions are, how real are daddy issues? And am I doomed to end up with someone like my father, or is there a way around it? And the thing is, Anessa, there has been a ton of research on father-daughter relationships. And in fact, Stuff Mom Never Told You, the podcast, has a whole episode on so-called daddy issues and the whole daddy's girl phenomenon, and looks more in depth at a lot of the studies that my co-host Caroline and I read. And there's a link for that in the description. And we also did a flip side conversation looking at mama's boys. Getting to Anessa's question of whether daddy issues are real, what does the research say? It says they kind of do. There are at least correlations between dysfunctional father-daughter relationships and more dysfunctional kinds of outcomes. Studies have found that girls who have tough relationships with their dad tend to have higher stress response levels. Their brains are a little more geared in that fight or flight kind of mode. And a lot of studies have also found links between dysfunctional father-daughter relationships and girls' risky behavior. And that's usually code for things like teen pregnancy, early sexual activity, drug and alcohol use, and even dropping out of school. Studies have also linked daughters with trash heap type dads having lower self-esteem, lower self-disclosure, and more self-silencing in romantic relationships. In other words, we get into these relationships, but we're not like fully ourselves. Partially because we're probably wanting those people to like give us something. We want them to compensate for something that they're never gonna really be able to compensate for because it's like our own issues and not theirs. But also because we might simply be modeling what we saw our parents doing, or the kind of coping mechanisms that we developed in order to deal with their dysfunction. I think it's also important to keep in mind that research also finds those trash heap parents are probably modeling what their trash heap parents modeled for them. When it comes to being repeatedly now as an adult or even as a teenager attracted to these trash heap kinds of people who are very reminiscent of your trash heap parent, it's probably not just your parent to blame, but the attachment style that has resulted from that, and specifically anxious attachment. If you are anxiously attached to someone, you need constant validation from that person. You know that that person can't possibly love you as much as you love them, and you need them to fill a void in you. They're never gonna be able to fill it. In other words, Anessa, what I'm saying is that no, I don't think that you are doomed to only date trash heap people. But as someone who did, yes, go through the phase of repeatedly going for trash heap kinds of dudes, that's usually a real big sign once you can recognize it and accept it and not romanticize it as like, oh, I just like bad boys, which I did briefly. You've got to take some time and focus on what that trash heap behavior that you know is unhealthy is arousing in you. And I don't necessarily mean arousing in like a sexual sense, but why you see that and you're like, oh, I know how to deal with that. It's the person that you had to deal with and you developed all your coping mechanisms around when you were young. It might feel like you're never gonna break free from that, but it is possible. And I think the first big step is just recognizing the pattern and being willing and brave enough to face it. But now, friends, I'm curious to know what you think about daddy issues and also mama's boys and how gender plays into this. And if you had a trash heap parent, how that played out for you, and maybe tips that you might have for having healthier relationships in the future? Let me know in the comments below. And thanks to everybody who watched and commented on last week's Ask Kristen video. Should parents be allowed to choose their baby's sex? Carrie Schumann, for instance, commented, I think choosing the sex might be okay if you have like 3 girls and really want a boy. Think about Mrs. Weasley, who had Charlie, Bill, Percy, Fred, George, and Ron, then Ginny. She kept trying until she had a girl, and it would have been a lot easier if she was able to choose. Now, I don't know if basing our reproductive technology on Harry Potter is a great idea, but interesting point. Gizmos Monster raised a thought-provoking question. Should gender-specific adoption be illegal as well? I know the big difference is that the baby is already born, but I still choose the sex of the child I want in my home. What are your thoughts on this? And my thoughts on that, Gizmos Monster, are honestly, I'm not nearly as concerned with sex-specific adoption versus sex-selective pregnancies. Does that mean I have a double standard? As always, friends, if you have any thought-provoking questions, you know where to leave them in the comments below so I can give you some answers.